Welcome to Old Virginia Homes. Today we'll be visiting an old Shenandoah Valley farm, first established in 1818. A peaceful place along the Valley Pike where the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains rise in the background. For decades, this farm family carved a life out of the soil, raising wheat, livestock, and fruit, and operating a blacksmith and wheelwright shop that supported the community. But on May 15th, 1864, that peace was shattered by war, with the family finding themselves smack dab in the middle of two opposing sides. While they hunkered down in the cellar, a bunch of barefoot boys, completely inexperienced in battle, met their deaths in the family's fields. Although all battle scenes are bloody and brutal, the details of this account are even more graphic and heartrending than most. Join me as we visit the Bushong Farm, an old Virginia home in Newmarket. Let's go. In 1814, Jacob Bushong, a descendant of early Shenandoah Valley settlers, wrote a letter to his beloved Sarah Strickler, saying, "Though I am not of wealth, I have a treasury of love for you." 4 years later they married, and in 1818 Jacob built a modest log home for their growing family. By 1825, Jacob was seeing an increase in prosperity brought about by his successful farm and its associated businesses. This allowed the family to construct the larger farmhouse we see today, a classic Federal-style home reflecting stability and ambition. The house, with its limestone foundation and wood shingle roof, common in the Shenandoah Valley, reflects the Federal style of architecture with a pediment portico and symmetrical 3-bay front. This was a place where multiple generations lived under one roof. Together, Jacob and Sarah had 6 children, although only 4 survived to adulthood. As their family grew, so did the house, and by 1852 it looked as it does today. Here, children were born, meals were shared, and seasons passed by in peaceful repetition. By 1864, 3 generations lived here. Also by 1864, the American Civil War had stretched into its 4th year. The rural countryside was not spared the savagery, and in Newmarket, the opposing sides would collide, with the Bushong Farm sitting squarely between them. The Union forces were led by Franz Sigel. The Confederate troops were led by John C. Breckinridge. As the battle erupted, 7 members of the family took refuge in the cellar. Throughout that long, torturous Sunday, they would hear cannon fire that would have shaken the ground, musket shots that would have cracked through the air, and the vocal outbursts of the soldiers fighting and falling around their home. Outside, what once had been rows of wheat and orchard trees had become a theater of war, the Battle of Newmarket. But this battle was messier than most. As the Confederate line faltered under pressure, a fateful decision was made to call in cadets from the nearby Virginia Military Institute. These were students, teenagers, some as young as 15, all of whom had been studying in classrooms mere days before. They were now called to the front lines and began to march across the fields toward the sound of gunfire. But 5 days of relentless rain had soaked the ground, turning the fertile soil to mud nearly knee-deep. And if you've ever stepped in deep mud, you can just imagine what this would have felt like. Sucking muck, forcing these boys into slow motion and stealing the shoes and socks off their feet. As they advanced through the foot-tall wheat, they were sinking into the muddy quagmire. The earth itself would have seemed to be swallowing them up. Still, they pressed forward, barefoot and under fire. This ground would come to be known as the Field of Lost Shoes. But shoes were not the only thing that was lost that day. 10 young cadets lost their lives. The Confederates claimed victory at the end of that battle, but at the expense of approximately 744 Union casualties and 588 Confederate. And although the battle was over, the Bushong House was not yet returned to peace. It had changed from a family's refuge to a field hospital filled with the wounded, both Union and Confederate soldiers. Remarkably, the house and its outbuildings, including the barn, received very little damage. After the war, the Bushong family continued to farm the property, but it also became sort of a shrine, a tourist attraction before it was formally a tourist attraction. In 1944, George Collins, an alumnus of the Virginia Military Institute, purchased the farm. Upon Collins' death in 1964, he willed the property with the direction that it should be a museum. The Bushong House opened to the public in 1976. The historic Bushong farmstead is now part of the Virginia Museum of the Civil War, which is operated by VMI. In addition to the museum's exhibit galleries, the site also includes a 300-acre battlefield park. The Bushong Farm is typically a completely self-guided tour, although there are events throughout the year that involve historic interpretation. A film about the battle called Field of Lost Shoes is shown in the museum's theater every hour. When we visited, I was so curious to know more about the curious architecture of the museum building, which was designed in the 1960s and dedicated in 1970. It's a unique-looking structure, but is actually very purposeful in its design. Can you guess what it represents? Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll tell you if you're right. Thank you for visiting the Bushong Farm with me, an old Virginia home.